44 Magnum and why it still is a great option for personal protection. You know, I get a lot of comments on my channel anytime I test a 44 Magnum. Not so much anymore because I'm kind of proving some of the misinformation is wrong. But I used to get a lot of comments about 44 Magnum, how awful it was. So, and a lot of these comparisons here I'm going to talk about, I'm going to compare 357 Magnum to 44 Magnum because 357 Magnum it's pretty much the one that's all others are judged by, even currently. You know, a lot of people know about the 357 Magnum, how it has 96% one-shot stop. So I'm going to compare the 44 Magnum to that, and just kind of for a base reference for this. So I have a couple of references here. Here is the 44 Mag and the 357 Magnum. Big difference. And if we compare something like a 9mm here, using all XTP bullets here, massive amount of difference there between the 44 and the 9mm. And also my guns that I'm going to use for reference are 4-inch L-frame Smith & Wesson revolvers. I got 4-inch ones specifically because they are pretty much the most common, right in the middle law enforcement type barrel length. So I thought in my ballistic testing, that's the perfect gun to get. And also because if you get like 6-inch revolvers, you really can't carry those very easily. So my 4-inch 686 is actually 4 and an 8. And then I have a model 69 here, which is actually 4 1/4, but they're both L frames. They're both really similar weight. I think this is 37 and some change for weight. This is like 39 and some change, but loaded up, we can say both of them are right around 40 ounces or so. So I took some information off Chuck Hawks and off the Greg Ellifritz studies. And Chuck Hawks, the one round that is really known for stopping power is the 125 grain semi-jacketed hollow point. And pretty much Federal, Remington, Winchester, they all rank the same because it's basically the same round. It's a 125 grain semi-jacketed out of a 4-inch barrel at about 1450 feet per second. And the one-shot stop statistics on that has been 96% for a long time. There was a lot of data on that, and it's really consistent data. But if we look at the other 357 Magnum rounds out of a 4-inch barrel, they're anywhere between 83 and 90% one-shot stop. And we see kind of the same statistics when we look at like 9mm plus P, 40 caliber or 45. Usually you're right in there 75, 80 to 90%. But what makes the 44 Magnum so much different than the others is its consistency of its quote-unquote stopping power. I wrote down the information with a bunch of these rounds here, and what we're looking at for 44 Magnum is the rounds that were actually used by law enforcement. And just keep in mind, the 44 Magnum was used for law enforcement. It wasn't a standard issue weapon. I know some departments use like the 41 Magnum for a while, but 44 Magnum was definitely used in those departments, or sheriff's deputies or sheriffs or chiefs or whatever. There were examples of officers actually carrying a 44 Magnum because they had that personal choice. And what's cool about this information is all this information is basically out of 4-inch barrels, 4-inch barrel 44 Magnum. But what makes this so interesting is the consistency is very, very close. One round that was used for law enforcement, there's a lot of data on it, is the 180 grain Urban by Corbon. And it's only 1,200 feet per second, 576 foot-pounds energy. Pretty low, but 90% one-shot stop. And there's the El Dorado Starfire 240 grain. And this is more of a consistent round that matches kind of your target rounds. That is a 240 grain jacketed hollow point, 1,180 feet per second, 743 foot-pounds energy. But it was also 90% one-shot stop out of a 4-inch barrel. And then we have the 210 grain Winchester Silver Tip, 1,301 feet per second average out of a 4-inch barrel, 788 foot-pounds energy, also 90%. So what I'm seeing here, in my opinion, is that when you look at 44 Magnum, if you look at the energies, whether it's up there close to 800 foot-pounds or below 600 foot-pounds, what seems to be happening, in my opinion, is that when you have a difference in energy, it's kind of made up for by the bullet weight and mass. So unlike like a 45 ACP, that has a lot of bullet weight and mass, but the energy is low. 357 Magnum, on the other hand, the energy is pretty much always high, but the bullet weight kind of changes and the design changes. But with 44 Magnum, it seems to be that even if you have a low-end mag round or a high-end mag round, once you hit that, around 575 foot-pounds energy, it really creates a consistent amount of quote-unquote stopping power. So very interesting information. Now on the Greg Ellifrit study, 357 Magnum and 44 Magnum, I'm going to compare these here. What we had for 357 versus 44 Magnum, on average, with just, the rounds are not necessarily listed specifically, but what we had, 4% fatal, 34% with 357, 44 actually only 26%. Very interesting that it's less likely to be fatal, but when we look at the Chuck Hawk stopping power, it's just as good, pretty much consistently. Next information, average rounds to incapacitation, basically the same, 1.7, 1.71 with the 44 Magnum. The number of people not incapacitated, 9 with the 357 Magnum, 13 with the 44 Magnum. But you got to keep in mind that when we look at stuff like 9mm, 40, 45, they're typically up there 15, 16, 17% not incapacitated. So 13% is still really good. This is still the king at 9%. Now, the actual one-shot stop statistics on the Greg Ellifrit study shows that the one-shot stop statistics, 44% for 357 Magnum, 59% for the 44 Magnum. Interesting. Accuracy, 81% with those hits. With the 357, 88%. The percentage that were actually incapacitated with a shot to the head or torso, 61% with the 357, 53% with the 44 Mag. And some of that information I don't 100% understand, but you get the rundown of it. 357 and 44 are both way above 9mm, 40, 45, pretty much anything else. So the fact that the 44 in some of those numbers is lower, it's still way higher than a lot of those other cartridges. So that's still some pretty important information to keep in mind. So because of that information, my particular carry load is a low-end 44 Magnum. If we look at that one round that was a 180 grain Corbon Urban, 1200 feet per second, what I actually carry in this gun and keep in this gun, I don't actually carry it very often, but I keep it in my house for home defense, is the 180 grain Buffalo Bore. We were working with only 1272 feet per second and 647 foot-pounds energy. And by the way, in my ballistic test, this stopped in the back of jug 3, indicating 15 inches comparison to ballistics shell. I did not go further in wood than 9mm when I did a wood test, and that's one thing that people like to say, that it always over penetrates. If we look at that Corbon round, it was right around 15 inches, 15.3 inches in gel. So, we're seeing consistently that it has consistently high stopping power, very low failure to stop rates, and the over penetration in my test and in all the information I look up on it doesn't show that it penetrates any more than anything else. Recoil energy, a little bit higher with the 44 Magnum, but it's kind of negligible. It's kind of hard to do those calculations on it. But it shows just a couple more foot-pounds of energy. It depends on what you look at, the data you look at, and the round you look at. So I can't really give a number, but it's just a couple more foot-pounds energy, which is not necessarily significant, because that's like comparing a 38 Special and the 686 here to a 9mm in a 4-inch barrel. You're only 2 foot-pounds more recoil energy. It's not significant. In a lot of my testing here, I have consistently shown that really placing follow-up shots is not that difficult. And that's one of those things you hear a lot. Well, you get your first shot, you can't place a follow-up shot. Well, that goes along with a lot of the misconceptions of the 44 Magnum. A lot of people have the misconception that it's a 1,000 foot-pound energy round, and it can't go down from that. And that's a big misconception with ballistics in general that people have, that a 9mm is this, a 38 Special is this, and a 357 is this, a 44 is that. And none of that is correct, because every different load is different, and you have low-end loads of 44 that are less powerful than high-end loads of 357 Magnum. That happens across the board with all handgun cartridges. But as far as not getting follow-up shots and rounds over penetrating through a ballistic test, people are looking at rounds like this. This is like a heavier 800, 900 foot-pound energy hard cast round. Oh, well, of course that's going to over penetrate through a human analog. And then they look at soft point rounds, a 240 grain. Of course that's going to over penetrate. And they're quoting that and saying that, well, that's follow-up shots. You can't get follow-up shots because of that. But it's all about load choice. Here's a couple more load choices that are really great here. We have the Hornady Handgun Hunter. What I got with that was, again, right around the back of the third jug, as well as this PMC round. Both would indicate about 15 inches comparison to ballistics shell. This round had around almost 800 foot-pounds energy. I think it was around 750 or so. And this one only had 660 foot-pounds energy. So we're seeing the same thing in my ballistic test, where a big variance in energy still comes out to about the same amount of penetration. And I would be willing to bet that either one of those rounds, even though one has more energy, would have about the same effectiveness in quote-unquote stopping power. And another thing that's not talked about a lot, I don't know why it's not talked about. You always hear people say, well, you can get 357, you can shoot 38s. You don't hear it as much with the 44 that you can shoot 44 special. There's 44 special and 44 Magnum here. Same bullet, so you can kind of see the difference. And this particular PMC 44 special was like 250 foot-pounds energy. Also, the 44 Russian, that's another thing that you don't hear a lot about. 44 Russian was actually one of the most influential cartridges ever designed. It was before the 45 Colt. It was the first cartridge that was inside of the case rather than having a heel bullet, and that influenced the 45 Colt. It's the first cartridge that ever came out with a revolver where the chamber was tapered down, or the cylinder throats were tapered down, so that the back of the cylinder and where the bullet enters the front of the cylinder was a slightly smaller size. I won't get into all of that, but 44 Russian is a little bit less powerful than 44 Special, and the 44 Special is a lot less powerful than 44 Magnum. So when you shoot those through a gun like this, I mean, you're not going to really have any more recoil than a 9mm pistol. So it is a very versatile round. It's something that can be carried very easily. You have a lot of choices between low-end 44 Special, high-end 44 Special, low-end 44 Mag, high-end 44 Mag for carry choices. So I would say our consistency with the 44 Magnum overall is higher than any other cartridge for self-defense. So my opinion is that the 44 Magnum is probably one of the best cartridges that you can carry for self-defense. You just have to find your particular load that you can handle well, because it pretty much any of them are going to consistently do well. And this will kind of all come down to high capacity versus less capacity, higher stopping power versus maybe not so high stopping power. So our continued debate is always going to be, higher capacity but smaller is a 9mm. And boy, that thing looks really tiny compared to that 44, but that's your 9mm. And 5 shots is your average needed for self-defense. And I'm kind of willing to bet here, if you made 1 or 2 shots with the 44 Magnum, it's going to be a little bit more effective and stop a threat better than the 9mm. And I'm seeing that in my ballistic tests. I'm seeing it's a very capable cartridge. So is the 44 Magnum an awful choice, like people say? No. I mean, if you're stupid about it and you load it with a hard cast round, well, of course it's not a good choice, but that could be said for any cartridge, even a 9mm or 380. If you pick your load choice correctly, it's going to do very, very well. So I just thought I would share my opinion on that. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.